The courtroom was silent, so silent I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. My parents sat across from me, their lawyers whispering like vultures before a feast. My mother's lips curved into a smug little smile, the kind she always wore when she believed she had finally outsmarted me. My father leaned back in his chair, arms folded, as though victory was already his. The judge shuffled papers, clearing his throat. Every eye in that room was on me. The quiet kid, the one nobody ever thought would fight back. My parents had told the world this inheritance was family property. They'd painted me as selfish, greedy, ungrateful, and for months, people believed them. I glanced at the thick folder in front of me, my fingers tracing its edge. Inside, it was the truth. Proof so sharp it could slice through every lie they had built. My mother's smile widened, as if she already saw me broken. I leaned forward, steady, my voice calm. They thought this would break me. But they had no idea what was coming fade to black. Before the lawyers, before the courtroom, before the flashing police lights. My life was simple. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the type to make waves. I worked long hours at the library in town, stacking shelves, fixing old bindings, and listening to the creak of wooden floors that had held generations of footsteps. I liked the quiet. The smell of books, like paper mixed with dust and memory, calmed me. People often said I was too soft-spoken, too patient. But I believed in peace. I believed in giving more than I received. Family dinners were where that belief was tested most. My parents, Henry and Marlene, were people who loved appearances. They smiled wide in church pews, spoke sweetly to neighbors, but behind closed doors, they ruled through control. My older brother, Kevin, was always their golden child. The one with the new car at 16, the private college tuition, the future leader speeches from Dad. Me? I got hand-me-down jackets that never quite fit and polite nods when I brought home good grades. I never complained, at least not out loud. There was one memory, though, that stuck like a splinter. My grandmother's birthday. She had given me an old piggy bank shaped like a ceramic owl. Its glaze was chipped and one wing was cracked, but she pressed it into my hands like it was treasure. "This," she whispered, "is for the things you earn yourself. Nobody can take that away." Later that night, when I proudly set it on the dining table to show everyone, Kevin laughed. He pulled out his shiny new watch, a gift from my parents, and held it up. "Look at that," he smirked. "I got something useful. You got junk." My parents chuckled along with him, as if cruelty was just a joke we were all supposed to enjoy. My face burned, but I swallowed the humiliation. I remember my grandmother's eyes across the table, sad, knowing. She didn't speak up, but she squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. That was the first time I realized the quiet ones in the family carried the heaviest weight. Years passed, and the favoritism only grew sharper. Kevin borrowed money he never repaid, yet was praised for being ambitious. I stayed late to help neighbors with their taxes or mow lawns for free, but my parents dismissed it as wasting time. The pattern was clear. Kevin took, I gave, and in their eyes, that imbalance was natural. Then my grandparents died. It was sudden, a car accident on a rainy night. I can still hear the sound of that phone call, my aunt's voice breaking as she told me. The world felt gray, like the sky had collapsed. My grandparents had been the only people who saw me, not just the role I played in the family. The funeral was a blur of black clothes, murmured condolences, and the smell of lilies. My parents stood stoic, already calculating what would come next. Kevin wore dark sunglasses, hiding eyes that weren't red from tears, but from late nights out drinking. I felt alone in my grief. Then came the reading of the will. The lawyer's office smelled of leather chairs and old wood polish. My parents sat expectantly, their hands folded, waiting for the wealth they assumed was theirs. Kevin lounged like he already owned it. And then, like lightning cutting the sky, the lawyer read the words that would change everything. "To our grandchild, hero's name, we leave our estate, assets, and total holdings valued at $31.5 million. The room went silent. My mother's lips parted, then pressed tight. My father blinked once, twice, his jaw stiffening. Kevin's sunglasses slipped down his nose, revealing wide, stunned eyes. Me? I didn't move. My chest tightened, but not from joy, from fear. I knew, in that instant, that my life was no longer mine. My parents smiled politely at the lawyer, but beneath the surface, I recognized that look, the same look Kevin had worn when he mocked my owl-shaped piggy bank. It was the look of people who believed they were entitled to what was mine. And deep inside, I knew the humiliation from my childhood was only the beginning. Fade. Slow inhale. The storm was about to break. The days after the will reading were a blur of phone calls, forced smiles, and uneasy silence. My parents didn't rage. Not yet. Instead, they put on masks of civility. "We're just glad it stayed in the family," my mother said over dinner one night, her fork cutting too sharply into her chicken. My father nodded, eyes glinting. "Of course, you'll need guidance. Handling that much money isn't something you can do alone." Guidance. The word sounded like chains. At first, they tried to wrap their control in sweetness. My mother showed up at my apartment with grocery bags, setting them on the counter without asking. "You shouldn't be wasting time shopping," she said. "That's what family is for." My father began sending me suggestions, lists of investments, properties, family projects that just happened to benefit Kevin. But beneath the politeness, the pressure grew. Kevin was the worst. He called me late at night, voice slurred with alcohol. "You don't deserve it," he muttered once. "They only left it to you because you kissed up to them. You think you're special? You're nothing without us?" I hung up, but the words stuck like glass in my skin. Then the campaign began. Neighbors I'd known for years started pulling away. Mrs. Clark, who used to bake me pies, crossed the street instead of waving. My boss at the library grew strangely distant, muttering about family drama, distracting me from work. Even at church, whispers followed me like shadows. It didn't take long to find out why. My parents had begun telling anyone who would listen that the inheritance was a mistake. They said my grandparents had been manipulated. They called me selfish, greedy, ungrateful. My mother's favorite line was, "We raised him, and this is how he repays us." By hoarding what belongs to the whole family? Every rumor they spread was like a crack in the foundation of my life. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of it pressing down. Sleep didn't come easily anymore. When it did, it was broken by dreams of my mother's smile, Kevin's mocking laugh, my father's cold stare. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and some mornings, I could barely keep food down. My body was keeping score of every lie told against me. Still, I tried to hold my ground. I stayed polite. I answered their questions with calm deflections. I told myself that if I didn't fight back, it would all fade. But the truth was, their voices were louder than mine, and people believed them. One evening, after yet another tense dinner, where my mother reminded me of the family's needs, and my father accused me of forgetting my roots, I left the house shaking. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I pulled into a gas station and just sat there, forehead pressed against the steering column, trying not to break. That's when it happened. A soft knock on my window. Knock. I looked up, startled, and saw an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Rachel. We had gone to school together, and life had pulled us in different directions. She worked at a local nonprofit now, and her eyes carried the kind of gentleness I hadn't felt in weeks. "Hey," she said, voice low. "You don't look okay. Want to talk?" For a moment, I wanted to wave her off, hide my unraveling, but something in her tone, steady, unjudging, made the walls inside me crack. I nodded, and we ended up sitting on the hood of my car under the gas station lights, sipping cheap coffee as cars hummed by on the highway. I told her everything. She listened. Really listened. No interruptions, no judgment. Just her eyes fixed on mine, steady as anchors. When I finished, she put her hand on my shoulder. "You're not crazy," she said, "and you're not alone. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Her words sank into me like rain into dry earth. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift, a flicker of strength I thought I'd lost. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. Fade. The war was only beginning. The kindness from Rachel gave me strength, but my parents must have sensed the shift. That's when they decided to stop pretending. It started with a phone call from my landlord. His voice was hesitant. Your parents, they came by, said you might be leaving town. They asked about your lease. Leaving town? I hadn't said anything like that. My stomach dropped. They were trying to create a paper trail, to make me look unstable. Next came the police. I was making tea late one night when red and blue lights flashed against my window. 2 officers knocked firmly on my door. My heart raced. They asked if they could come in. My parents had filed a wellness check, claiming I was a danger to myself. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the kettle still whistling, steam curling like smoke. I'm fine, I said quietly. Would you like to look around? The officers glanced at each other. My apartment was spotless, books stacked neatly on shelves, dishes clean in the rack. After a short, awkward silence, they apologized and left. But the message was clear. My parents weren't just whispering anymore. They were weaponizing authority. Soon after, I was summoned to a family meeting. It was held at my parents' house, the same dining room where Kevin once mocked my owl-shaped piggy bank. The long oak table gleamed under the chandelier, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. My parents sat at the head. Kevin slouched to their right, smirking as if he already knew the outcome. My father cleared his throat. We've been patient. But this inheritance, this isn't just yours. It's family property. My mother leaned forward, her voice sharp. Think about everything we've given you. Do you really want to tear this family apart over money? Kevin chuckled. Grandma and Grandpa didn't know what they were doing. They meant for all of us to share. You can't honestly believe you should keep it. The words pressed down on me like weights. I looked at each of them. My father's stiff posture, my mother's cold eyes, Kevin's sneer, and felt the walls closing in. But then, my hand brushed against the folder I'd brought. Inside it were documents my grandparents had carefully prepared, the will, financial statements, even letters explaining their decision. They had thought ahead. They had known this fight would come. I slid one page onto the table, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. This is the legal deed to the estate. It's in my name. Exclusively. For a second, silence. My father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked rapidly, her hand twitching against the tablecloth. Kevin leaned forward, reading the bold letters as if they were written in fire. You forged this, he spat. I shook my head. It came directly from the lawyer. I can have him verify it? My mother recovered first, her smile returning, thin and brittle. Fine. But money doesn't change family. We'll still expect you to contribute. A house for Kevin, investments for your father. You'll understand once the pressure settles. They thought they still had control. They thought intimidation would bend me. But something inside me was shifting. I could feel the steel forming where fear used to live. I gathered the papers calmly, sliding them back into the folder. I'm not agreeing to anything tonight. Kevin slammed his fist against the table. You don't get it, do you? You're nothing without us. I stood. My chair scraped across the hardwood floor, the sound sharp as a blade. You're wrong, I said quietly. For the first time, I'm beginning to understand exactly who I am. I left the room before they could respond. Driving away, the night air cold against my face, I realized something. Their power came from my silence. Every time I swallowed humiliation, they grew stronger. But now, I had proof. I had allies. I had more than they ever expected. They thought they still had control. They didn't. Fade. The war lines were drawn. After that night, the masks came off completely. My parents didn't call to guide me anymore. They demanded. Kevin stopped pretending to be a brother and openly called me a thief. And soon, their campaign spread like wildfire. Neighbors I'd known since childhood whispered when I passed. A coworker at the library mentioned she'd heard I was mentally unstable, too fragile to manage money. Even my pastor pulled me aside one Sunday and said, "Family comes first." Maybe sharing would ease the tension. The lies were everywhere. They weren't just twisting my story, they were erasing me, rewriting me into the villain. And yet, amid the storm, I began to change. Instead of shrinking, I started documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every interaction. I saved copies of the fake rumors people repeated to me, tracked down the origins, and quietly gathered names. My apartment became a war room, folders stacked neatly, sticky notes on the wall, timelines drawn with careful strokes. The owl-shaped piggy bank from my grandmother sat on the desk, watching. Its chipped wing reminded me of her words. "This is for the things you earn yourself. Nobody can take that away." I tapped it sometimes when the weight felt unbearable. It wasn't just a trinket anymore. It was proof that even when the world mocked me, she believed in me. Meanwhile, Kevin unraveled. He showed up at my job one afternoon, loud enough for customers to hear. "Hey everyone," he shouted. "Want to know how your librarian brother is robbing the family blind?" His voice echoed in the quiet library. People stared. My face burned, but I stood my ground. "Kevin, you need to leave." He smirked, leaning closer. "You can't hide forever." Everyone knows the truth. I didn't argue. I just pressed the security button under the desk. Minutes later, 2 officers arrived and escorted him out. This time, I wasn't the one under suspicion. That moment shifted something in me. I realized I didn't have to fight the way they did, with noise and venom. I could fight with proof, patience, and silence sharp enough to cut. Rachel was my steady anchor through it all. She reminded me to eat when stress made my appetite vanish, dragged me on walks when my chest felt too tight, and encouraged me to see a lawyer who specialized in inheritance disputes. That lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Patel, studied my folder of evidence and nodded slowly. "You're more prepared than most clients I see," she said. "Keep documenting. This will come to a head in court, and when it does, you'll want every detail." Her words steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was building my own strategy. But my parents weren't done. They began recruiting others, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, neighbors who owed them favors, even members of the church committee. Suddenly, letters appeared in my mailbox accusing me of abandoning family. One distant cousin sent a message calling me a parasite. It was clear. They wanted to isolate me completely, to make me so desperate for connection that I'd hand over everything just to stop the bleeding. Instead, their desperation only revealed cracks. Kevin was arrested one night for drunk driving. The news splashed across local headlines. My father lost his temper at a town meeting, shouting at a councilman about family property, which raised eyebrows. My mother's charm began to slip as more people noticed how often her stories shifted. And me? I grew quieter, but sharper. The piggy bank now held folded papers, copies of critical documents, each slip of paper tucked inside like ammunition. I smiled faintly whenever I dropped another one in. The owl's chipped wing wasn't broken anymore. It was scarred, like me, and still standing. I could feel it. The day of reckoning was near. Every move they made, every rumor they spread, every attempt to crush me, it was only adding to the case I was building. The tension stretched like a rope pulled too tight, fibers fraying. I knew the snap was coming. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. Fade. The storm was about to break wide open. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, like the weight of 100 years of arguments hung in the air. Rows of benches creaked as people shifted, whispering, waiting. My parents sat across the aisle, dressed in sharp suits, Kevin between them with his trademark smirk. Their confidence was unshakable, or so it seemed. My mother's chin was lifted high, my father's tie perfectly knotted. They looked like a family ready to set the record straight. Around them sat distant relatives, neighbors, even a few church members. Their army of supporters. I sat quietly beside Miss Patel, my lawyer, hands folded over the folder I'd carried for months. My grandmother's owl-shaped piggy bank wasn't with me physically, but I imagined it perched on the table, its chipped wing watching over me. The judge entered, and the murmurs faded into silence. The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. My parents' lawyer stood first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Your Honor, this case is not about greed. It's about fairness. The inheritance left to our client's child was always intended as family property. It is deeply unfair, even unnatural, that the rest of the family be excluded. We intend to show that the will was made under undue influence, and therefore, this fortune must be shared." Polite nods from the gallery. A ripple of agreement. My parents exchanged the tiniest smiles. Then it was our turn. Miss Patel stood slowly, her gaze sharp. Your Honor, this case is about truth. My client's grandparents left their estate precisely as they intended, to the one family member they trusted. Not under pressure, not by mistake, but with clarity. She paused. And we have proof. All eyes shifted to me. My pulse pounded, but my hands were steady. One by one, we laid it out. First, the legal deed, signed, sealed, witnessed, clear as day. The judge examined it, expression unreadable. Second, the letters my grandparents had written, tucked in the lawyer's safe for years. Their words echoed in the courtroom. We know our other children have taken much already. We leave our estate to the one who gives without expectation. May they use it wisely. Gasps rippled through the benches. I saw my mother's face blanch, her lips parting, my father's jaw clenched. Kevin leaned forward as though he could stop the words from existing, but it wasn't over. I pulled out the final piece, a stack of documentation, voicemails where Kevin threatened me, texts from my parents demanding contributions in exchange for peace, copies of false reports they had spread through the community. Each page, each audio clip, each printout was a nail in the coffin of their argument. Silence swallowed the room when the last paper dropped onto the table. The only sound was my father's shallow breathing. The judge looked up slowly. Do you have anything to say in response? My mother's voice broke first. This is manipulation. Those letters could have been forged. He's making us look like monsters. Kevin shot to his feet. You don't understand. He doesn't deserve it. I'm the one who... Sit down, the judge snapped, his gavel striking once more. The outburst echoed like gunfire in the silent room. Kevin slumped back into his chair, face red, hands trembling. I rose then, not because I had to, but because I wanted to look them in the eye. My voice was calm, steady, carrying through the hushed courtroom. For years you told me I was nothing, that I was weak, that I owed you everything. You mocked me, humiliated me, spread lies about me. You thought this inheritance was yours to take, just like you always took. But it isn't. And it never was. I paused, the weight of a lifetime settling on my shoulders, and then lifting. I don't want apologies. I want change. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My parents stared back, their empire crumbling in front of everyone they'd rallied to their side. The smugness was gone. My father's hands trembled. My mother's mascara streaked. Kevin's smirk had collapsed into a scowl of disbelief. The judge leaned forward. The evidence is clear. The inheritance belongs solely to the heir. This court rules in their favor. The gavel fell. The sound was final, and for the first time I felt free. Fade. The empire had fallen. The courthouse emptied slowly, murmurs trailing behind like smoke. I sat still for a moment, the echo of the gavel still ringing in my ears. My parents were gone before I stood. No goodbye. No last attempt at control. Just silence and the faint sound of their footsteps fading down the marble hallway. That silence told me everything. Their power had slipped away, and they knew it. Kevin tried to corner me outside, sunglasses hiding his bloodshot eyes. He opened his mouth as if to spit more venom, but when he saw the lawyer at my side, and the reporters who had begun circling, he froze. His hand twitched, then dropped. For the first time in my life, Kevin had no words. I walked past him without slowing. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread. My parents withdrew from community events they once dominated. Neighbors who had whispered behind my back now avoided eye contact, ashamed. Kevin disappeared into the city, his name tangled with rumors of debt and burned bridges. The family empire that once loomed over me crumbled like wet paper. And me? I finally breathed. I didn't rush into mansions or luxury. Instead, I bought a modest home on the edge of town, with a wide porch and a garden that smelled of lilacs in spring, the kind of place my grandparents would have loved. Rachel helped me paint the kitchen a soft yellow, the color of warmth. For the first time, I had a space that was mine, untouched by expectation. The owl piggy bank sat on the mantel above the fireplace, but it wasn't empty anymore. I filled it with small tokens, $2 bills, notes from friends, even a folded copy of the court ruling. It wasn't about the money inside. It was about the promise my grandmother had given me. Nobody can take that away. Every day, I built something new. I went back to the library, not because I needed the job, but because I loved the quiet order of books. I funded programs for kids who had none of the chances Kevin and I once fought over. Scholarships, after-school activities, reading clinics. Little things, but each one was a seed planted. At night, I'd sit on the porch, the cicadas humming in the dark, and reflect. My chest no longer tightened with dread. Sleep came easier. Food tasted better. Even the air felt different. Lighter, like the weight had finally lifted. But I also carried lessons carved deep into me. I learned that family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes it's who stands beside you when the world tries to erase you. Rachel, Miss Patel, even the quiet support from strangers in the courtroom, they became my chosen family. And I learned that silence, my old shield, had power only when paired with truth. For years, I thought enduring quietly was strength. But strength was speaking when the moment mattered. Strength was standing up in a courtroom full of doubters and saying, "I don't want apologies, I want change." The contrast between where I started and where I stood now was sharp. I remembered that night at my parents' table, Kevin mocking my owl bank while my parents laughed. I remembered the sting, the humiliation, the way I swallowed my pain. Now, that same owl sat filled with proof of resilience, a reminder that scars can become armor. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I held the piggy bank in my hands. The glaze was still chipped, the wing still cracked. But it had survived, just like me. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph in the shallow sense my parents chased. It was peace. And as I set the owl back on the mantel, the words came quietly, steady in my chest. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Fade. A new chapter opens. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or the abuse of power from someone who thought they owned you? Maybe it wasn't about money. Maybe it was about respect, love, or even just being seen for who you really are. If you've lived through that kind of storm, you know the weight it carries. And you also know the strength it takes to rise above it. So I want to ask you, how did you overcome it? What moment reminded you that you weren't alone, that you had the right to stand tall? Share your story in the comments, because someone out there needs to hear it. Remember this: worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself. Fade to black.